You hear these people that are on missions, they have epiphanies. Well, I'm positive I'm on a mission. Because when I started in the Toastmasters, I didn't really have any plans to do it. I just wanted to learn how to speak a little bit better. And this book here, I had no plans to write a book. It just happened like that at the Toastmaster meeting where this publisher encouraged me to do it. And then I had no plans to be asked to speak to the Sebring Tea Party. And when they first asked me, I said, wait a minute, this is a book about Vietnam. Tea Party's interested in current events. And so I said, oh, let me see, what can I do? So I realized you could relate these things and would hopefully help you have a better perspective on what's going on here today and how to go after it. And so I spoke there at the Sebring Tea Party. I spoke over in Melbourne at the Brevard Tea Party. Then I spoke at the Wauchula American Legion and some Rotary clubs. And the response that I was getting, it was like people appreciated it. And then suddenly the light came on. I said, I'm on a mission. I don't know if God sent it down, but he said, look, I showed you how to learn how to talk a little bit. We got that book out of the way, and then you got a good response. And I realized I love my country, and everybody has their talents. We all have different talents. Everybody in here is good at something. It's probably different. And I think mine is just to come to places like this, tell you a few of these stories, relate them to what we're facing today. I believe there are people today in the media and our government who are just as defeatist toward the Constitution and the American way as they were back then. That's why I am here tonight talking to you, encouraging you that I believe the only thing that's going to save us is for people like you to shine the light of truth on these people, and they'll run like roaches when you flip the light switch on in a dark room. But you have to keep doing it. And that's the main thing I came here to do, was to tell you that. Now, so much for my first year on the ground with the 4th Infantry Division. My second year, I had the privilege of flying Cobra gunships with the 101st Airborne Division. I say it was a privilege because Cobras were specially built aircraft that required great skill to fly and operate. They were built for one thing and one thing only, to deliver ordnance out to the enemy and lay it on them. They didn't do such things as go out on missions where they take the Red Cross girls out to the fire bases so they can hand out donuts. None of those missions. They did one thing only. They went out and engaged the enemy. They looked like sports cars. They were sleek. They only carried 2 people, co-pilot in the front, pilot in the back. When I was there, they had 2 air mobile divisions in Vietnam, 101st and the famous 1st Cavalry Division. And they used Cobras heavily. And in those divisions, those Cobras had 3 missions. Briefly, one was escorting the Hueys, another was CAV, going reconnaissance with the CAV guys, and aerial rocket artillery, better known as ARA. That was one of them right there. In those 2 divisions, aerial rocket artillery was an integral part of the division's artillery assets. What that meant, where the rubber meets the road, is whenever you had a forward observer from the artillery out with the infantry and he needed help, and all he had to do, pick up that little handset, press that button, and instantly request either tube artillery or aerial rocket artillery. What this did was greatly reduce the time it took to get those aircraft out there on station. And if you've ever been in a combat situation where those bullets are flying and you hear them going through the leaves above your head, you know minutes are critical. To me, the difference between life and death. And this is an extremely practical application of that firepower in those 2 divisions. Now, in the aerial rocket artillery units, and I was in the aerial rocket artillery unit, so I'm a little prejudiced here. Those aircraft were set up in what you call the heavy hog configuration, like that one, meaning each aircraft could carry 76 rockets. And they always flew in pairs, called a section. So every time a section went out, you had 152 rockets. That's over 1,500 pounds of TNT, and if you had a good, skilled pilot, you could put those rockets down with incredible accuracy and devastation on an enemy. It was extremely effective when they would let us go. Something else briefly about these cobras. They were specially designed for that purpose, and they had an element in their design that I believe was an unintended consequence. Because they were designed to go fast. So, and I don't think the guys, when they built these aircraft, realized what they were doing. But the rotor blade on a Cobra was 33 inches wide, much wider than most rotor blades on helicopters. And you've all heard helicopters flying around, military, civilian, whatever. They have that characteristic whomp, whomp, whomp sound. Cobras were different. When a Cobra flew with those big blades, you can kind of see it there, it's almost a yard wide. It made a distinct, deep-throated banging sound. It would go bang, 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 and friend or foe. If you ever heard a Cobra flying, you would know what that is and remember it, and especially if you ever heard them shooting rockets. Those rockets made a hellacious sound, and if you were near where they were shooting, you would always remember it if you lived through them, because they're extremely devastating to the enemy. Now, in the ARA units themselves, within these two divisions, they had two primary missions. One of them was LZ preps, and the other was fire missions, the most rewarding missions. Fire missions is, as the name implies, when somebody's in trouble, they call in a fire mission and we would go out and support them. We had a policy in the 101st Airborne Division where every ARA unit had to maintain a hot section. And that wasn't the name of a section in a Mexican restaurant. That meant we had two aircraft that could take off within 2 minutes of receiving a fire mission. And you did not have to tell an ARA pilot twice that we had to take off within 2 minutes, because we knew when a fire mission came down, they weren't kidding. Fire missions weren't called for routine tasks. We knew when a fire mission, when we got that message, a fire mission, our guys were in trouble, and when we took off, somebody was going to die. We always hoped it would be the people on the ground, and most of the time it was. But we didn't need anybody standing there with a stopwatch saying, okay, you were 2 minutes and 3 seconds on that last one, so we're going to dock you 10 points. We didn't need a commander standing out there saying, I command you to take off within 2 minutes. We didn't need that, because we knew when a fire mission came down that our guys were in trouble out there and they needed us, and we would go out there and help them. And those were some of my most rewarding missions that we did over there. And whenever we would go out and shoot these missions, whenever the conditions allowed, we would talk to the people on the ground. And they would say things like, thank God for ARA. We're so glad we would be dead without you. We love ARA. You're the greatest. You had to be careful. After a while, you get a few of these comments and you start strutting around, like you're something special. Now, I never did that. Some of the other guys did. But it was extremely rewarding. But it gets even better. This did not happen often, but it happened once or twice to me, and it still affects me to this day. One day we received a fire mission. As usual, we tore out of there, we went out there, we lit the fire, we took off, and we're flying out there with that tail high as fast as that baby will go. We arrive on station and we say, we are here, what do you need? Where do you want us to shoot? The guy on the ground says, we don't need anything. Says, what? No, they broke it off. My first thought was, you mean we broke up a perfectly good spades game and flew all the way out here in the middle of the night and there's nobody there? We said, well, what happened? Didn't you have some contact? I said, yes, we did, but they broke it off and withdrew. The LP said they're all gone. And I said, well, what do you think caused that? He said, apparently when we heard you coming, that noise that I was telling you about, and it was obvious that they were coming there, they left. Now that didn't happen all the time, but it happened 2 times. I'll always remember that. Like, just the noise we were making put the fear of Jesus in those heathens down there, and they left. Now that will get you going. That'll give you some job satisfaction. But enough of that. I want you to come with me. I'm going to turn the clock forward from back there in the Vietnam times up to, say, September the 11th of last year, I'm going to go across the water over to Benghazi in Libya. And I'm going to go to the American consulate there where Ambassador Stevens and the rest are located. And they're going to suddenly come under fire. Machine guns, mortars, everything. When I heard the news of that, now this is the truth, I've never had a flashback. But when I heard the news about that, suddenly, bang, something came to my mind instantly, and I remembered it on my first tour. Once or twice, we would come under fire, unexpected, just boom, out of the open, and it was bad. And you were afraid. And when I heard that about Ambassador Stevens, now I did not know Ambassador, never heard of him. But when I heard that report and what was going on, I'm fairly sure I knew exactly what was going on in his head, because the same thing had happened over there. When that would happen, you come under fire, the bullets are flying all over, and the explosions, you are scared to death. I know Ambassador Stevens, when it first started, he was scared to death. And if anybody goes through one of those things like that and says they weren't afraid, more than likely they will lie about other things. Because it's scary, I'll tell you. But over in Vietnam, when that would happen, you quickly get over that, because that's what you're trained to do. We were trained many, many times on the procedures and what you do. And you quickly get over that fright, and you like go to work, you know, you're doing this, put them over here, do this. One of the first things we would always do is pick up that handset and say, help, help, we're in trouble, help us out here. And you know what? Every time I did that, I was confident. When I called for help, that they were coming because we were, still are, Americans. And I don't care what anybody says, we are the best. And I know that we always come and help our people when they're in trouble, or we die trying. And every time we would do that. They would always came, the most beautiful sound in the world was friendly artillery rounds coming and landing out there. Sounds like the Orange Blossom Special, those big ones coming over. And then there was the most beautiful music with those helicopters coming out to help us. And I'm proof, I'm standing here, no Purple Hearts, that they always came through for us. Then I'm thinking about Ambassador Stevens over there. All of a sudden, he's in the American consulate. The American consulate. Not the Belize consulate, but the American consulate, and he comes under fire. And it's shocking. The machine gun bullets coming through the windows, ripping up the Venetian blinds, our hand grenades going off, or rockets. And I'm sure when that first started, he goes, what? What is this? And he's scared to death. But same thing, he's trained for that. He knew what to do, and I'm sure that took over. He started doing his thing. And I'll guarantee you, too, one of the first things he did was pick up the phone and say, boys, this is not a drill. We are under fire. I mean, these aren't demonstrators. We've got mortars. We got machine guns. We got RPGs hitting the building. We need help quick. And I'm sure he felt the same thing that I felt over there. He says, hey, we're in trouble, but we're Americans. We're the best. We take care of our people when they're in trouble or die trying. And he knew all that. He knew that we had Special Forces assets over in Tripoli. He knew we had jets up in Italy. A jet take off up in Italy, turn on those afterburners, and in a fairly short period of time would be over Benghazi. He knows all that. And you know what? He's wondering, where are they? You know, talk about these aircraft. Now, around here, you probably hear this all the time, but we've all been to air shows or an event somewhere where one of the services would do a flyover of their jets. You know, it could be a NASCAR race, it could be a game, it could be an air show. You know, you've been there, you look up. You look up at those jets, and you say, wow, those things are fast, they're loud, and they're ours. You get that pride. Wow, those jets are wonderful. But think about this. Just think about this. What if you looked up there, looked at those jets, and they weren't friendly? What if they were hostile and they were loaded with armament? And maybe they were looking for you. And if they found you, they were going to drop some of that armament on you. You would probably have a tendency to look up and say, they're looking for me. Let me get over here. You'd have a tendency to maybe lay low for a while. Ambassador Stevens knew this. He knew if there was some delay getting the Special Forces guys over, that all they had to do was send over maybe just one F-16. Let it fly around. And I'll guarantee you, you get an F-16 with bombs hanging on the racks, flying around. They look up there and see that, and just maybe those attackers could be distracted long enough for them to either get out of there or hold out until the cavalry comes. He knew all that, and he's sitting there, he's waiting. He calls again, hey, where are you? We need you. It's getting bad out here. Now, you know that went on for hours and hours. But he waited, and he waited, and he waited, and help did not come. And they all died. They were killed. I don't know if you've seen any of these videos. It's out of what they did to that poor man, Ambassador Stevens, the barbaric things they did to him. But they all died. Later, Hillary Clinton said, what does it matter? Mrs. Clinton, I'll tell you what it matters. Number one, it matters a lot to those 4 people that suffered the terrible sting of death. Matters a lot to them. Matters a whole lot to their families. Their families' lives are going to be forever changed. And most of all, it matters a lot to every American, everybody here in this room, in this whole country. The shame you brought on us because you apparently did not lift one finger to help those brave Americans. That's what it matters. Something else, Mrs. Clinton, I'll tell you what it matters. When you run for president in 2016, I'm not voting for you. And I'm advising everybody else here not to vote for her. It's terrible, the things that she did. But I've got to say this. Ronald Reagan, he liked to say that America is like a shining city on a hill. I believe America is still a shining city on the hill. Now, it may have a little tarnish here and there. And I believe what it takes to remove that tarnish is that polish of right here in this room, what you're doing. You come here and you look at the issues, and you're going to talk to your hired hands in Washington and the State House and the county commissioners, informing them that you're watching them and you want them to do what's right. I think that is what's going to make this shining city on that hill shiny as it ever was. I also believe that God had his hand in creating 2 nations on this earth. One was Israel and one was the United States. Israel is biblical. You can read about it there, about what happened. But in the United States, I believe God had a hand in it because there's no way a country could have done what this country's done in its history. Not only about what it's accomplished, but all the goodness it's done for the rest of the world, with the products, inventions, and so forth, the missionaries and all that. And I believe that it's still going to be good. And we just need to appreciate it, and we need to keep making it better and appreciating it. When I say appreciate it, I was a little embarrassed not long ago. I have a friend over in Sebring from Austria. When he was 17 years old, he came over to this country to spend the summer with relatives. When the summer was over and it was time for him to go back and go to school, he sent word back, said, I'm not coming back. I love what I see here, and I'm staying. He stayed here and he proceeded, and he went through the long and torturous legal path to citizenship. 2001, he went over to Miami in a big room with a group of a lot of other people and raised his right hand and became a citizen. He told me that ever since that day, He gets down on his knees and thanks the good Lord that he can be a citizen of this great nation. Kind of made me feel bad. I've been taking it sort of for granted all this time. But when he told me that, that's why I'm here tonight. I want to talk to people because I am so happy that you're here and doing what you do and listen to these speakers. That's how we keep this country great. And he helped make me appreciate what I have, and I value it. And I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you allowing me to talk about some of these adventures from Vietnam, and what I want to do is get you interested, keep you active in what you're doing, and keep on doing it, because that's what I believe is going to keep this country great. It's what made it great in the first place. Now, before I close, I have one last thing to say. Now, I like to be transparent. You ever heard that before? Well, I am transparent, and I have to say something here. What I'm going to say next is a bald-faced sales pitch. If you read my book, Vietnam Veteran Memoirs, I guarantee you'll be inspired, you'll be educated, and you'll be informed. That book is available on Amazon.com, both in the paperback version and the electronic version, so you can read it on your computer or iPad or whatever. But tonight, I brought a few copies with me. I will sell them, like you said earlier, I'll sell them at a discount. That's less than what it costs on Amazon for a mere $10, and I'll sign them for you. And who knows, maybe someday it may be famous. But there's more. There's more. I like that on the late night TVs. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I appreciate what you're doing, and this is one thing I can do. I brought a few books with me. I'd like to sell them all. I don't want to take any of them back. But for every book that I sell here tonight, I not only will sell it to you at a discount, autograph it for you, but I will donate back to this organization a portion of the sale of each book. So at least I'm not only just encouraging you verbally, but I'm going to write a check. Well, assuming we sell some books. I hope we sell some books. I'd like to write a big check back. Now, I only have, I think, maybe about 50 of them back there. And as soon as this is over with, I'll be back there by that little table. I'll be glad to sell them to you. So if you buy a book tonight, you not only will buy a book at a discount, I'll autograph it for you, it may be famous, but you'll get a good read, and you'll be helping out this here, maybe to help pay for some of those newspapers or something. It'll be a small thing, but I'm happy to do it. I would love to do it. And I really, really, again, appreciate you allowing me to come here and talk. It's all yours. Difficult ones like the world financial system. Yes.
Just one comment. Those great rockets, you should have dropped in on Jane Fonda.
Oh.
I called that in.
Yeah. Why did you have to ruin the evening? Matter of fact, when we were flying up at Quezon, remember when she had that famous picture made? I was right there, and that gun that she was on, almost that very day, we were battling those same guns there at Quezon, and I said, oh, please. But I'll let it by this time. But every time somebody mentions her, I kind of like lose it. Maybe I have to. I don't go to any more of her movies. But luckily, I never ran into her. Any other questions, especially about Cobra gunships? Oh, some people may, one time somebody said, why didn't you load the rest of those tubes in there? Well, those that are sticking out are 17-pounders. The rest of the 10-pounders were a little shorter, and they would go back in there. But I always stayed in trouble in there, and they had these rules about flying, weight and balance, and they, if you loaded too many in there, they would say it was too heavy. Now these people, now get this, we're in Vietnam, going out every day with people are shooting out as bullets are going through the canopy and all this, and guns going off, and they're giving you a hard time because you're over max about 100 pounds. I'm saying, oh yeah, I'm going to worry about that. I got other things to worry about.
Give me 10 minutes, we'll get rid of it.
But I always stayed in trouble. But anyway, anything else? Yes.
Mack, I'm reading your book, but anyway, I had a question.
Smart man.
I got to tell you guys, I haven't read very far in it, but it's really, really good, informative, and very, the perspective, I love it, you know, but one of the questions I have is like when you alluded back, not alluded, but you said you guys were out on patrol one of the first times, and you were out with the group, and they were sitting down the road looking up at the trees when you guys were under fire.
Oh, yeah.
Did that actually happen? I mean,
Everything in that book, to the best of my knowledge, was factual. And what happened, I was talking about the Raging Rhino. When I went over there to the 4th Division, we were assigned to the base camp, but the people in the base camp had to go out on recon patrols. They had a big circle around it, and we'd have to go about 10 miles out in the woods. And a new officer had to go out on an orientation platoon with someone who had already been out. And I had been with the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg training for like 2 years for this. So, and I was in a unit where they had another officer in there that was not like qualified. And so we go out there and, you know, I can't control myself. And I started asking lots of, why are you doing this? Shouldn't you do this? Finally, the guy got upset with me and said, I want you to go to the back of the column and stay with the guy with the spare radio. I didn't mind it. I was tired of him anyway. But lo and behold, they ran into somebody and shooting and everything. And I was in the back waiting for something. Nothing was happening. So I go up to the front. Now, this is what was so ridiculous. They had the lieutenant and the sergeant who were the patrol leaders. And I'm going up there through all this. And I get up to the front. And they're both of them, they're looking up into the trees. And, you know, the people were out there, you know, they're shooting. And I go up there and I said, why are you looking up into the trees? And he said, that's what they told us to do back in the talk. Now, the talk was back in the division, back in the base camp. We're out in the woods where the bullets are flying all over. And he's looking up in the trees. And I said, well, shouldn't you be looking out that way where the people are who's shooting at you? And I just thought it was ridiculous that this, naturally, we didn't get along that well. I said, why are you listening to what they say? They're back in the back in a bunker, and we're out here in the woods. They're the people out there. They're not up there. But anyway, yeah, that's what happened there. But all that was true. Yes.
Our soldiers in Afghanistan are being forced to guard over the opium fields in Afghanistan. And I'm just curious, did you see any of the opium fields out there? Because they always talked about the triangle, Laos, Cambodia, and all of that, or the rubber, things like that.
Believe it or not, I never saw any of that stuff I never saw a protester. You know, they always talk about the protesters would cuss. I never saw one. I never saw any of that. I never saw any Agent Orange. But no, most of that was over further east in Thailand, and I think, because I didn't see much of it in Vietnam, although it could have been there. I mean, there was a lot of things going on there.
Well, you guys were my hero back then.
Well,
We didn't protest you. You were our hero.
well, I appreciate that, but, you know, thank you. I just realized in all these units I was in, all the people there, they were just normal people, just like in this room. It was just normal people, and sometimes you're in unusual circumstances, but they were all just regular people. You know, every once in a while, people would do things under unusual situations, but we were nothing special. We were just regular people. I always say, our country called. You know, when I was going in, my country called and I answered it. Unlike Bill Clinton. Bill, he didn't answer when the country called him. He went over to, where was it, Russia, Moscow.
Canada, then England for a year, then Moscow 2 years, and then became president.
How did he become president?
Thank you very much.
I've wondered about that. Yes.
I was on the ramp in Danang, and one of your Cobra ships was taken off, and I wasn't aware that when the co-pilot looks around, the gun follows his head. It gives you kind of a thrill.
Yeah. If they would ever shoot.
Look at you like that, and that gun comes around.
I hate to say it, but very few of our turrets ever worked. We just shot the rockets. You had a...
Been back to Vietnam since the war ended? And
Me?
Would you go back if you haven't been back? I know that's a very popular place for people to vacation.
Oh, I was thinking about it, but it must be age. It must be age. For some reason, the good Lord has put me in Lake Placid. Other than to come to places like this, I don't care about going. I wasn't really sentimental. I mean, I wouldn't mind, it'd be nice to see, but it's not a big thing. I don't want to go back over there. I love this country. I don't even like to go out of the South, the Southeastern, much less the country. I like to stay within the old South. I went out to San Francisco, and every time I opened my mouth, it'd say, "Shut up, you bigot." You can't call a Chinese person a Chinese or an Oriental. You have to call them Asian, or they get all offended. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get far afield there. But no, seriously, on this book, we would like to sell some. I don't want to take any of them back with me. They're too heavy to carry around. But no, any more questions about Vietnam? Now, there was how many people heard that the majority of the soldiers in Vietnam were draftees? That was a common, they're just draftees. You know what percentage of the military over there were draftees? 25%. The other thing was that a lot of them said they only took the uneducated people and put them out there. Do you realize that 80% of everybody in Vietnam had a high school diploma or higher? They said it was the most educated. I don't know if they've looked at Afghanistan, but it was the most educated military force of all times. And you had all these people say, well, they're just the ignorant ones that went over there. So the biggest lie of Vietnam of all is this one. Now, this is my opinion. Have you ever heard anybody say we lost Vietnam?
Yeah, the lefties.
It's the only war we ever lost. Did they forget about the Second Seminole War down in Florida? That we lost that one. They don't mention that one. But Vietnam, now this is what happened in Vietnam. I told you that Ted 68 and it went until 73. The war ended in 73 when they had that Paris Peace Accords. If you remember, it took them like a month to decide on the shape of the table. But they had the Paris Peace Accords, and we went home. It was over. And it wasn't until 2 years later when we cut off all aid to them, and we talk about lies. That's one of the things we told them: we will support you, we'll supply you. Congress cut it off, didn't send them a penny. And then 2 years later, the North just drove down Highway 1 to Saigon and said, guess what? This is now Ho Chi Minh City. So they didn't lose there. And the Americans, I don't care what you say, these movies like Full Metal Jacket and all that. The American soldiers in Vietnam were magnificent. All of them. You have a few bad apples here and there, but on the whole, they were magnificent. And they did a wonderful job, and yes.
The only two bad apples that I'm privy to are some drunken loser by the name of John McCain
Yeah.
and a fraud by the name of John, shoot myself in the foot to get a Purple Heart carriage.
I said there were a few bad apples, but overall they were magnificent. I think you said you were up at Quin Yon. I think you'd agree with me that the people, you get a few bad apples, but overall, those guys did a wonderful job under extremely difficult circumstances. Ever seen those pictures of those guys, the tunnel rats that would go down in those tunnels? I mean, they didn't know what was there. And it just really bugs me that they don't get more credit for the wonderful job that they did. And this thing about Walter Cronkite, that bugs me to no end that these people were putting out this information. And that's why I'm happy that you're here. And that gentleman back there is talking about these things, that you're aware of them so that we can at least talk to our hired hands up in Washington and the other places, and the county commissioners. Y'all have some very interesting politicians up here in Okaloosa County. They do? Scandaloosa. Did they have a politician here one time by the name of Sykes? I remember, did he have some problems? He did something. I just remember somebody. But no, I tell you what, It's a long way from Lake Placid, but this is a wonderful part of the state. This is a wonderful country up here, and I just appreciate the opportunity. And I think I'm going to pull out for 5, 10 years. And when they recognize the opportunity, like with these finances and everything, they come back. He was all ready to go, but something happened. Anybody want to guess what happened? You were right. Good old Walter Cronkite, man that everybody loves. He got on the CBS Evening News talking about the Tet Offensive. He looks at the American people and he says, "We have lost the war." When I heard that, I was at sea. I was flabbergasted. I was as confused as I was the time I saw a warning on a cigarette lighter that said, "Keep away from open flames." I thought, Cronkite, what are you talking about? They just threw everything they had at us, and we beat the stew out of them. What in the world were you talking about? I was thinking back then, he said, well, if you think that we lost the war because of this, we should lose the war every day. About 3 or 4 days, there wouldn't be any of them left. I still hadn't figured it out. I have a few theories why he would say that. His buddy, Jed Duvall, was doing the same thing. Somebody else heard that report. General Gapp heard that report, and it confirmed his belief he was fighting an enemy with a weak national will. And he decided to continue fighting the war rather than pulling out. And that was in 1968. The fighting continued until 1973 when they signed the Paris Peace Accords and we came home. Now, I always liked Walter Cronkite. I watched him for many, many years. But after seeing what happened there and experiencing that and studying that and hearing what he said about it, I am persuaded to believe that the blood of all those Americans that died from 1968 to 73 is on the hands of Walter Cronkite and his defeatist friends in the media. And I'm sad to say, I believe there are people today in the media and our government who are just as defeatist toward the Constitution and the American way as they were back then. That's why I am here tonight talking to you, encouraging you that I believe the only thing that's going to save us is for people like you to shine the light of truth on these people, and they'll run like roaches when you flip the light switch on in a dark room. But you have to keep doing it.